new tool circling around of late that allegedly allows you to paint fast while also being kinda smooth.
Weird.
Of course, I'm talking about makeup sponges, but are they a scam? Or are they really that awesome? So in today's video, I'm gonna test the makeup sponges method, breaking down and fix all the issues they might have, finally tell you if they are a scam or not. In the first part of this video, I'm gonna try out the sponge, see what works, what doesn't really add up, based mostly on the instruction given online or on YouTube. Then I'm gonna show you how to actually use this tool based on my experience. The first thing I notice about this tool is that it can really base coat. As I start layering up with dark green, this problem was even more obvious. So there's that. Even smaller sponges are gonna have an hard time getting in those recesses. On the flat panels though, it works like a charm. Does it substitute an airbrush? It's not very smooth and it's hard to get in smaller places. I think there are other ways to base coat faster and more efficiently, so for base coating, maybe not. For some reason, I thought I had a brilliant solution for this problem. Turns out, it was a pretty lame-ass idea. The eyeshadow sponge buds, while being in the same material as the makeup sponges, they are way too small and they have a wrong shape to be used for this technique. So yeah, nah. Then I started applying the highlights with grass green from AK. I tried to tap the sponge into the most lit areas and tap further away to blend those transitions. Again, something that's pretty clear to me though, subassembly is a necessary evil in this case. Even when I cut the sponge in smaller pieces, I couldn't have work properly with the arms attached or the mini attached to the base really. This first attempt wasn't that bad, but it did leave some ugly holes from me dragging the paint off, so that's something that we need to fix. I get it how this tool can be passed as a magic tool, when in fact it needs way more instruction to use than what people give online. But don't worry, because from this test I figured some stuff out and now I'm gonna break it down. But first, what did I learn from this first trial? Sponges are bad for base coats, the subassembly is kinda needed, the eyeshadow sponges are meh, not really usable. The brand and the type of paint you're using is kinda important because that's gonna determine the thickness of the paint, and here it's kinda important. And the dilution and the pressure determine your results. Having said that, let me break down how to use this tool in just 3 main steps. After reapplying the dark green base coat, I start by loading the sponge with the highlight color, which is grass green. You see, for this step, you need to use the paint pretty much out of the bottle. I tested other ways to blend with the sponge. Honestly, this one was the best, and in the next steps, I'm gonna tell you why. I'm just sketching the highlights in this stage, try to use different parts of the sponge for different areas. For example, on a more rounded chest, I try to use the rounded side of the sponge, while on the shins, I'm using the cut side of the sponge, which is sharper. For the smaller parts where the weird tubes thingies are, in the front and in the back, it was a bit more challenging. You need to press more the sponge to get into the narrow spots, and this results in you having way less control. The consistency here is pretty straight out of pot, like I said. That's important to reach full opacity fast, so you'll need to be more careful when you apply it. Every paint is gonna be a little different. This works best with thicker paint that covers in one layer. With more transparent paints, like with red, you will need more layers. Consistency and the opacity transparency continuum is gonna be really important as we move on to step 2. Here's where the magic happens. This time when I pick up the paint, I'm tapping my makeup sponge on the wet palette sponge first, so to moisten it. Then I pick up the paint and tap the excess off, way more than the other step this time. Here you need to be very delicate and start tapping in the highlight area, gradually moving towards the dark green base coat. As you do this, you can also change side of the sponge using the side with no paints to blend in that color. No matter what we run, what method do we use, if we use paint, you're gonna have to deal with the big C, consistency. I made a free consistency cheat sheet guide you can download for free in the link in the description. Anyways, here you can see why the previous sketch was kind of important. It's pretty well known that if you touch wet paint, whether it's with a brush or a sponge, you run the risk of leaving the surface uneven with holes. Ugly. With the highlight areas dried, you are good to go. Still, this method is hardly perfect. It's pretty easy if you want basic result with little to no contrast and a cheaper alternative to an airbrush, but it's not gonna be as smooth. But if you want a more cool and contrasted look, you'll need to push through that learning curve, and hopefully this breakdown will help you do that. Still, this method is hardly perfect, but I think it can be an interesting starting point to get some gradients on and practice dilution and pressure with your hands. And since there's some unevenness present, we're gonna fix it in step 3. By picking some of that base coat of dark green, same dilution and same unloading as the previous step. This time though, I applied in the opposite way, first tapping in the base coat / shadow areas and then extending that glaze with the clean part of the sponge. Yes, glaze, it's a fucking glaze. Get over it. Please remember to swap the sponge side pretty often, as when the paint dries, it's gonna clog up that nice sponge texture. You can reuse and wash this. They're so cheap that I don't know if it's that worth it, but you can wash it, but don't use it right away because these sponges, well, are sponges and absorb a lot of water, and that's not good because we want to have full control on the amount of water. How do I know this? Because I'm a girl and I use it for makeup. And sometimes you kind of gotta clean those shit up and they get so filled with water. Anyways, from here you can block in the other details and call it done, or you can go in with another highlight layer, adding a bit of yellowish highlight. In this case, I just did some hedge highlights, some very low pressure glazing with my brush in the shadows. While I share the final steps and the full model painted, let me share with you the conclusion I have for this technique. Well, it's undoubtedly an interesting tool. I did find the experience a bit frustrating because, like I said, it was a big learning curve, but maybe if you integrate it more with some other brush technique, it could really shine even more. A lot of the results and the struggles as well are gonna depend on the light to dark contrast that you're gonna choose. What remains true for any kind of value jump is that some spots are really impossible to blend, like you see on my Termi here. I think I prefer the dry brush texture because I just find it more interesting. But tell me what you think. Speaking of texture, what if you want to have texture in your model? How can you do that without spending hours cleaning up all the transitions? Well, watch this video next to discover how some tips and a dry brush can transform the way you paint armies forever. And I'll see you there. I mean, you'll see past me. I'm not just